I love the comparison of these two headlines, both from Forbes, because we had this one that came out on the 12th, the Acolyte Episode 3 review, one of the most disappointing Star Wars episodes ever. And I guess a headline like this couldn't stand without being answered because, I don't know, Disney maybe called them up and said, like, hey, you're making us look bad. Can you do something about that? And then we got this one a couple days later. The Acolyte's 15% audience score is embarrassing for the audience score. So it's not embarrassing for the show or the fact that a lot of people don't like this show. It's like, no, this is entirely on the fan base. And can I also point out that it's not 15% anymore? It's now down to 14%. A small difference, but still, I wanted to point out that it's actually worse than what this article is saying. But let's dive into this a little bit and see why it's actually embarrassing for the audience to give it a low score versus why it's not bad for the show to just receive such a low score. While Star Wars had many controversies in the Disney era, viewers have now mobilized a fleet of TIE bombers to obliterate user scores of the Acolyte whenever possible, namely on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb. Oh, yeah, we can see the result of that is pretty bad, but I don't see the problem with people, using the features on these sites for its intended purpose, which is to give ratings, but I don't know, let's continue. I previously reported that this started up right at release as the Acolyte quickly became the lowest audience-related Star Wars project besides the infamous holiday special. Now its former 33% score has dipped below the special's 20% score and is all the way down to 15%. I'm not sure what the author of this article, Paul Tassi, is getting on about when he's complaining of the score for this first couple episodes, because he himself didn't really like the first couple episodes. He also wrote this review on Forbes, the Acolyte's twin concept sputters in its debut. I'm not going to read through this whole article right here, but just kind of scrolling down to the very bottom of it, it ends with this. It's just 2 episodes, but I do hope things get better from here, as I was not in love with the double premiere and the twin thing feels grating and forced to me, but we'll see how it goes. So even he himself didn't like the first couple episodes, but he's kind of lambasting the fan base for also not liking it and going out of their way to give it a bad score. I guess he's of the mindset that he's being paid to watch it, so there's nothing wrong with him watching it and giving a bad score, but I guess he's saying the audience shouldn't even be bothered with it and should just kind of ignore it, or at least that's the most generous interpretation I can get from this, but let's look into it a little bit further and see if that's really the case. And if that is the case, and it's a pretty stupid argument to say that fans should not be watching a franchise that they're supposed to be a fan of because they might not like it. And if they don't like it, then don't even bother using the features on sites available to them in order to rate it, because I don't know, it makes you a loser if you do that. At a certain point, this is just absurd, and it says a lot more about the viewer than it does the quality of the show itself, which has barely even gotten started now, just 3 episodes in. I don't like this argument that it's only the first few episodes into the series, so people should be a little bit more lenient with it, because on the one hand, I can understand the argument because there are many shows that, even ones that I like personally, that take a little bit to get into, but once you get into it, then you're kind of glad that you were able to slog through the earlier stuff of it. But usually for something like that, there's something at the start of it that kind of hooks you right off the bat. So even if you're not necessarily enjoying what's coming immediately after that, there's still something that keeps you wanting to watch it, but we're not getting it with this. And also, I don't think people would be complaining about the low scores of the early episodes. People are saying like, oh, I don't like it because the first few episodes are bad and they're giving it a low score. Those trying to defend it are saying like, no, that's not fair. It's only the first few episodes in. But if people were giving it a high score in the first few episodes, do you think that would also be fair criticism? It's like, oh, why are you giving it a high score at the start? You don't even know how it ends. It could be terrible, because I think that's a fair argument to be made. If you're going to complain about low scores during the early episodes, then you should also be complaining about high scores during the early episodes too. But I don't know. That's just what I think about it. No, I'm not going to entertain a debate that this is not review bombing. That's very mature on his part, saying like, no, I'm right. Anyone who disagrees with me is wrong, and I'm not going to justify myself on that one. But he does explain, saying that the 15% score on Rotten Tomatoes, now a 14% score, as well as the 54% of the reviews on IMDb being 1-star reviews, are why this is definitely review bombing. And you can see the chart right here of the IMDb reviews. Yes, there's a lot of 1-star ones, but you also have to keep in mind, he himself gave it a low score for the first few episodes. So I guess in his minds, the fans can't give a low score either, or maybe he thinks his score is the correct score. So anyone who does a lower score is a troll review bombing. But If you're going to be intellectually consistent, then you would also have to say anyone who's doing a higher score is also review bombing it, but in the positive direction. And that's when you'll see stuff like this when it comes to fans reviewing things. You'll see a lot more uptick on the wings where you have a high amount of 10s right here and then a high amount of 1s. Typically, you would think it'd be more like a bell curve where if it's something really good, then it would start off high and then kind of taper down and then stay down opposite if it was a low score. And then if it's something mid, then just the typical bell curve. But you don't see that when it comes to things like this because it's pretty divisive. So people love it or hate it. It just so happens there's a lot more people that hate it than they love it. I don't consider that review bombing unless you're going to say that these are just a bunch of bots on there. Because if it's one person submitting thousands of negative reviews to try to drive down the score, it's like, okay, that's review bombing. But if it's just a bunch of people individually deciding to give it a 1-star review, well, then that's not review bombing. That's just using the function of a site in the way it's intended to function. There's nothing on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes that says you're not supposed to review it if, I don't know, if a lot of other people gave it a review, because that doesn't make sense. This is something that you would think a lot of studios be excited about, having a fan base that's this passionate. I mean, Disney paid billions of dollars for Lucasfilm in order to have such a passionate fan base. It's just unfortunate for them that they don't know how to service this fan base, and this is the result of it. I don't think there's anything wrong with people going out of their way to give it a negative review because, you know, that's just the way things go sometimes. Because you have to understand, audiences don't have any obligation to review something on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes. A lot of people don't bother doing that unless they really feel strongly about the project that they're watching. So if it's bad and they really hate it, then yeah, they're going to give it a 1-star review. And it just seems to be that's the consensus opinion right now. Something Disney could do is to try to learn from this and figure out like, okay, what can we do in the future to make sure this doesn't happen? But instead they're been doubling and tripling down on what they're saying and basically just trying to lobby accusations of racist and sexist at particularly the old school Star Wars fans, the George Lucas Star Wars fans. And this really doesn't seem to hold water because even for Disney Star Wars, they've done stuff similar to this. Like look at Rogue One. This is actually pretty well received even from the old George Lucas Star Wars fans. And this stars a strong female character and it has a very diverse cast, but people still like this show or this movie, sorry. But this is what the Acolyte was trying to do. They're trying to have a diverse cast with strong women in it, and it just didn't work out for them. And it's not because people hated those things. It's because people didn't like what they're making. And Disney, and they're not trying to learn from it, or at least they're not signaling that they're learning from the audience. They're just signaling like, we just want to double and triple down on what we've been doing. And this is why I maintain that Disney now is not trying to capture that old Star Wars fan base. They're trying to find a new Star Wars fan base. And I don't know. I mean, it just doesn't seem to be there for them. And that's why we're not having this good score reviews for the Acolyte. Because if this is what the new fan base are trying to get after, then, well, this is what you're going to get. So I don't know. I think they'd be better off trying to go back to the way things used to be because we've seen from Disney, they can make Star Wars stuff that people like. Mandalorian, for instance, the first couple seasons of that were good. Like Rogue One, that was good. But I don't know. They seem to be hell-bent on going down this path. And sorry to see it, but if you're going to continue on this way, then you're just going to continue to see something like this and continue to lose money, or you can try to fix it. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Do you think this is review bombing, or do you think it is just a passionate fan base just making their voices heard? Comment below. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share the video because it helps out with the channel. Thank you.